And I was talking with my life coach, and he said, instead of thinking about how, think about why, and get into the state of seeing it as done and how much joy that's going to bring you. How much lift is that going to feel for you emotionally? See it as complete and what life is like on the other side. And so I did that every day. I wrote out this big document which explained like what I'm so grateful to be doing now.
Do you want to create more freedom in your life? And I ask that seriously because if you do, then this episode is for you. Now, Sterling Griffin is someone that has been in my life. We've known each other for quite some time, but this is the first time that we get to sit down with each other. And what is really remarkable, what is so amazing about what we get to share with you in this episode is we really get to peel back what has Sterling been doing over the last few years. Him building a successful business, but then coming to the realization that he doesn't want to be in that business anymore. He was becoming unhappy and he was building resentment, but then being able to make some really ballsy, really fantastic decisions and actions moving forward, and to now what has unfolded into what his life is today that you're going to find out in this episode, I think is really cool. It is inspiring to me, and I think it's going to be really inspiring to you as well. So if you're joining us on the podcast right now, I'd love for you to come join us onto the YouTube channel as well, so you can watch this conversation unfold in all of its delight on camera. And also, if you're going to share this out on social, because I would love for you to share this out on social as well, and I'd love to know what it is that you really got from what Sterling shares in this episode, then please tag myself and Sterling as well, as I would love to personally say thank you for you joining us in this episode.
So the way I want to start this is that we've known each other for years now. I think we just joined the dot, so it's been like 5 years, which is amazing. So I'm so happy to be finally sitting down with you, Sterling. Like I admire you in so many different ways, and where I want this to pick up from was, I don't know where you posted it, but you shared a post, and it was the case of you learning chess, stand-up comedy, boxing.
Boxing.
Okay.
It's amazing you remember all this.
Yeah, there was more in it though. I want to say there was maybe.
Yeah, it was poker.
Poker.
I was working with an acting coach at that time.
Yes.
I still am, but started then. And let's see. There's probably something else. Shooting as well. That was a big one.
Amazing. So there's 6 amazing things on that list. And for the context, it was Sterling sharing that you're now learning these things because you have the space and freedom to be able to do that. Yeah. And what I picked up from it was you're extremely conscious about what you wanted to do with your time and with your life. And it got me to literally stop and say, well, what do I want? And from a very deep place, like it was deep down internal.
Yes.
Like the times I had asked that so previously were extremely superficial.
Yeah.
So I want to say personally, thank you so much, Sterling.
Oh, dude.
Because I know from that, and I know the few times that we've had conversations, I've always walked away a better human being. And I think it's remarkable. And so I want you to know the positive impact, just because I think you really should deserve to know that as well. And I want to pull back all of these. I want to pull the threads through this conversation that we have right now. So if we can, let's do a little bit of a peeling of the back to get to that point.
Yeah, sure.
Let's go through that. How did you get to that point? And then let's move forward from there.
That's cool. You did it like in a movie where they start in the middle.
Yeah.
And then there's like major conflict. You're like, how did we get here? And then they flash you back and then get up to that point. Where do you want to start?
Well, let's talk about the building of the business that you then sold. But I would love to peel back because of people getting stuck of being in a business they don't love.
Okay.
And then once you were able to sell it, what's happened from there?
Yeah, let's talk about that. So when I started the training business, because it was first a training business. Okay. You were a trainer for many years, so you get it. Part of your business is supporting trainers. And when I started that business, I was living in my car in Los Angeles. So I was living in my Honda Accord, beat up old car, and I was homeless for 5 months straight. What led to me being homeless was just before that, I was a pastor in a church. I've been a pastor for several years, but while I was a pastor, I was attending graduate school. I realized that I honestly didn't believe it anymore. Like I didn't have the same belief about Christianity, about Jesus in the way that I did prior. And so I walked away. But what happened then is I went through this kind of emotional breakdown, just call it what it was. And 2015 was that year where I was such an emotional train wreck that I couldn't keep a job. I couldn't focus on work in any respect. I was just like sitting in my room all day feeling sorry for myself for literally months. And that culminated with me not being able to afford my $250 a month rent to sleep on the floor of this 2-bedroom apartment with 4 other guys in it, and being the 5th, in a 2-bedroom. And so I moved into my car, and that was kind of the breaking point of like, okay, something's got to shift. What I did was, instead of spending that money on rent, the little bit that I had left, I spent it on a Tony Robbins event. I went to the Unleash the Power Within because I realized that this isn't just going to shift on its own. I've got to get some help from a pro. So I went to the UPW, Unleash the Power Within, in Los Angeles, and an amazing event. Have you been to a Tony event before? Yeah. So Tony, of course, is great and well known for a reason. His stuff is amazing. But at that 4-day weekend, I heard him say one thing. He said, if you take nothing else from this 50 hours of workshop time that we're going to have, but one thing, let it be this. And he said, proximity is power. Who you surround yourself with is who you become. And I started looking at my life, and I'm like, why am I broke? Why am I unhappy? Why all my relationships suck? Well, it's because all the people around me are that. They're a mirror of that. And so it just set me on this like furious mission. I say furious, but just like passionate, crazed mission to get around people that are more successful than me in each of the different areas, and that somehow that would bleed over to me. So I started doing that, started making friends, and one of the things that happened is I got around this life coach. This was in Encinitas, California, if you ever heard of it. It's just north of San Diego. Big life coach community, especially at the time. And I was talking to someone, and I was telling her about how hard it was to start this business because I decided I'm going to start a training business because it's the only thing I was good at. The only thing I had working for me is I was in good shape, and I had a body transformation. And I was like, man, this online coaching thing is so hard. Like, it's hard to get clients, and I'm broke, and all this blah, 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 whining. And she said to me, well, who's your mentor? And I said, well, I don't have a mentor. I don't have enough money for a mentor. And she stopped me and she said, that is the exact problem that would be solved if you got a mentor. Not having money is not the problem. Not being able to create it is. And so a light bulb switched on at that moment. I realized that I need to get a mentor, whatever it takes. And so I borrowed money from my dad, which was a super embarrassing moment in my life for me, given how I always wanted my dad to feel like, I wanted him to think I was responsible and could take care of myself. But nonetheless, I did it. I borrowed the money. I started with AJ Mirzad, who you know. Yeah. He was my first coach because he was referred to me at that time. And so that first month, I went from making roughly $1,000 a month, just kind of throwing shit together. I had no idea what I was doing, making $1,000 a month, to making $4,000 my first month with him, which, I mean, at the time, for context, $4,000 might as well have been $1 million. I mean, it was so much money to me and such a dramatic change. I 4x'd my monthly income, right? So that was not enough, though, to make the second payment because I was on his payment plan. It was enough to finally make some payments on my credit cards, which I'd been maxed out and missing payments on, and pay rent somewhere for the first time in 5 months. But it wasn't enough to make the second payment. And so I remember this was a Thursday afternoon. I was a couple days late already for the second payment. AJ's hitting me up. Hey, are you going to pay your bill here? We got to kick you out if you can't. And it was like a come to Jesus moment, forgive the pun, because I just left Jesus. And and I realized that I had to find a way to make it work because not working with a mentor was not leading me anywhere good. So I had to find a way to get the help. But there wasn't many options that I had given that all my credit cards are maxed out. So this was 2:00 on a Thursday. By 9:00, someone handed me $4,000 cash and drove away with my Honda. I had sold my car. I'd made an ad on Craigslist, posted it, and sold my car so that I could keep working with AJ, keep working with that mentor. And if you can imagine, the next month I was a bat out of hell. I mean, I was just absolutely wild, going to do whatever he said. And I made $12,000 in my business, which again was extraordinary. Like, people in my family don't do that. It doesn't happen for us. I hadn't seen it before. And but then I grew from there. I mean, it was 15,000 the next month, 16,000. 19,000, 17,000, 18,000. Within 6 months, I'd made 100 grand, which again was just so much. And around that time, I went to a leadership training. So again, I kept reinvesting in mentors. I went to this amazing emotional intelligence leadership training. It was in LA at the time, but now it's based here in Austin. And I started literally after going to that training making 40 grand a month in my training business instantly. And I tell people, if anybody wants like the best personal development recommendation of anything I've ever done, and I've done everything that Tony offers, it's this workshop. But anyway, we can talk about that later if it makes sense within the storyline. 40 grand a month, and then around the next year is when I just had so many trainers reaching out to me about how do you grow a business? Because I knew you when you were fucking broke. Like, I know your story. How the hell is this possible? And so in 2017, I started mentoring other trainers. The short version is that by the end of that year, between the training business and the mentoring business, I made 1.68 million. My second year in business. And again, for context, the previous year, I was homeless at the beginning of the year. I ended up with 285 grand by the end of the year, the first year. So big change. And then that business, in 2018, I fully did the mentoring business. And it was 2.2 million, 2019, 2.6 million. And then 2020, the year that I sold, it was 3 million right when I sold in revenue. But I think if we want to talk about what happens when you start to have your business no longer fulfill you, that was where I was at the beginning of 2020. And I started to feel it before COVID, but I think just as COVID was for many people, it was kind of like a take a step back reflection time for a lot of people on what's most important to them. And I realized that I was working 70 hours a week. I'd been working 70 hours a week for ever since my business started. I just got into that habit. And I'd been so disassociated from fun. Like, the idea of fun felt so far removed from my life for so long that I remember one of my life coaches asked me, what do you do for fun? And I couldn't answer the question. I remember thinking, like, what do I do for fun? And I started thinking, nothing. I work. That is what is my fun. And that was like a wake-up call for me that I need to make fun happen. Thankfully, at the time, I also had another mentor who showed me that it's possible to have a multi-million-dollar online business but not work all the time. So following that example, I went from working 70 hours a week down to 5 hours a week within the span of about 3 months, just like handing off everything to leaders. Thankfully, the business continued to thrive and profit, actually slightly more after that transition. And it was during that time that I'm like, all right, I'm going to do everything I think is fun. I'm going to take chess lessons. I love learning. Learning is like my number one favorite thing. So I'm going to take chess lessons. I'm going to take acting lessons, stand-up comedy, shooting lessons, poker. We've gone through them. And the purpose of that post was just to share, like, it was basically to share a transformation about how I'd gone from having no fun to having so much fun in a short time. Hopefully other people, they give themselves permission from that. I mean, everybody struggles with something. Some people struggle with having too much fun, right? And not enough discipline and work. For me, it was the opposite. And so it had the unintended effect. I was obsessed with fun, but it had the unintended effect of making my business more attractive to being acquired. And when I had the space from the business, from the day-to-day of the business more specifically, I realized that it was no longer satisfying me. I think that when I was in the day-to-day, I didn't even know that I was unhappy. I think we can kind of put ourselves in this hypnotic trance as business owners, like, I like it because we feel we need to like it for our survival to be guaranteed or insured. But for when I realized, I actually don't need it, like, I can still get paid from it without having to work as hard. It's like, this doesn't actually light me up. Now what would? And I remember I was sitting not far from here, we're in Austin right now, and I was sitting at dinner with my mom, and she asked me this question. She said, what would you do for your career if money were not a problem? Money were not an option? And it was one of those moments I had never thought about the answer to that question before. And yet, I learned the answer as I said it. I heard myself say, acting. I would be an actor. It was something I did as a kid. It brought me so much joy. I felt so much myself doing it and entertaining people that in that moment I realized, that's what I need to be doing. That's what I got to find a way to do in a way that works for me. And of course, I still love business, and I'll always have businesses. lights me up to play the game of business in different ways and offer value through what business can do. And yet, telling interesting stories, raising humanity's consciousness through these stories and through these characters that I get to play is ultimately the thing that I want. So that's how I both started and ended up out of that business.
Incredible, dude. I love it. I love it so much. It was where there's some parallels and where I see you doing such a great job. I've said multiple times, I want to continue to say it, that I admire you for so many different ways. At the moment, I'm down to a 6-hour-a-week CEO role, knowing that I'm going to replace myself within the next few months and grooming that, doing mentee to take that spot. And
amazing, man.
Also, it was Taki, actually, that we were having lunch. He was in Bali one time. It was, we were having lunch together in Bali, and he asked me, what would you do if you didn't have to work for money? And I had never thought about the question, been asked the question, anything about it. And what fumbled out of my mouth was learn and share. And I was like, I want to learn stuff and I just want to share it, which is interesting because that's what we're doing right now. This is what I want to be doing in the form of it, and sort of the mediums. And I find this interesting because you've been able to walk a path so consciously and so well. And I admire that for so many ways. And I want to peel back when you sold the business. Walk me through what happened. Sold, signed, sealed, delivered.
Sure.
What goes through the internal dialogue then?
Yeah, well, the most important thing that I did to get the business sold was I started to see it as done before it was. So it's not exactly a normal thing to sell an online coaching business, and it certainly wasn't then. I think since I sold, many more people have sold, and I've helped some people sell their business, which has been really cool. But just kind of like as a one-off here or there, certainly not building a business around it. But at the time, I'd literally not known anyone that had ever done it. And so I'm like, well, how does one sell a coaching business? And I was talking with my life coach, and he said, instead of thinking about how, think about why. And get into the state of seeing it as done and how much joy that's going to bring you. How much lift is that going to feel for you emotionally? See it as complete and what life is like on the other side. And so I did that every day. I wrote out this big document which explained like what I'm so grateful to be doing now, that the responsibility of the business is removed. And it's still, and I started thinking about like what are all the aspects that I want as part of the sale. Of course the money, like what do I want to be paid? But then also is critical, and I think all coaches really fundamentally are this way at their core, is like I want my clients to be good. Like I don't want to just have it be sold and then it's like some loser that it doesn't care about them. Like I started a coaching business because I had a skill that I could offer, but I also really cared. And like I said, I think 95+% of coaches are the same in that way with their heart. And so I saw it as done. I saw my clients taken care of. I saw the new leader like really excited and going to make it better, like make the programs better, make the business better than I ever did. I wanted them to be superior to me in where they could take the business. And then finally, I wanted it to feel really, really easy. That was such a critical word for me. I'm like, oh, this is effortless. This feels so natural and easy. It's not hard. I think if we don't, well, I'm not going to speak for other people, but I think for me, if I don't see it as easy, whatever the goal is, if I don't see it as like, oh yeah, of course, kind of energy, then it automatically becomes hard. Because I'm leaving room for it to be hard and take more effort and more energy. But if I consciously say, oh no, it's so easy. I've got the best people that know how to structure it and the right lawyer and all that, and it's coming to me rather than me chasing it, then that's what happened. I remember literally, I remember the day I felt so in touch with it. So in touch with it being done, with having a great acquire, and literally within a week it was done. Within 7 days it was done, it was acquired, and I was free. And I agreed with the transition I was going to stay on for like basically a couple hours a month for 3 months, and then that was it. So that closed in October 31st of 2020, and then I stayed on till roughly mid-February, something like that. And yeah, never looked back.
amazing.
I'm retired from coaching. That
Really cool.
yeah, in that particular form especially.
Congratulations.
Thanks, man.
So when that happens, what goes through your head now to be like, I'm now forming a life,
Yeah.
going to lead a life that isn't what I was just doing?
Yeah.
Did it feel like a fresh canvas, or
Totally.
yeah? So like, how did that feel, and how do you then navigate forward?
Well,
Can I actually ask one more question before?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Did it feel like an identity shift?
definitely. And I will say this, whenever I coach people, whenever I have coached, and I don't mean that in a formal sense, I mean, whenever I've ever just shared this story with coaches that are thinking about making that transition, I always explain that it's really important for you to see yourself doing the next thing in your mind before you sell, because otherwise you're going to approach it with so much anxiety and so much stress and so much survival fear that you're going to, first of all, make it harder, and you're probably going to push it away. So for me, I had gotten, like, literally for months, I saw myself doing these other things, so that when the transition fully happened, I was really comfortable in that new identity. It felt like it was already me.
That's cool.
I felt like I was already, the business was already sold before it, in this physical world it was. So yeah, I think that's really important. Is people need to, you need to see yourself doing whatever that next thing is, and that means that while you have the business, you can try different things. That was my mission. I tried like so many things, and from that came the realization, oh, what I want to do is I want to act. So that when I sold, it didn't feel scary. Now, certainly, making money at acting is not like a short-term thing, unless you're famous, right? Like if you're famous, you make great money, of course, but there's a lot of people that want to be actors. And the advantage that I had when I walked into doing acting is, first of all, I had money, so I didn't need to be paid in the same way that other actors need to be paid or have to keep another job. But also, I brought these skills of being able to influence, being able to network and connect in ways that most actors don't. Like most actors, and it's one of the most competitive fields in the world, as anyone knows, most actors don't have any business sense. Like they're just artists. That's what they have, is they have, hopefully, at least they have this, is talent to be able to show up, and when their camera's rolling, they can deliver the character. But few actors understand the business side of it as well. And I think business is simply, or influence rather, is simply, what is it that you want? How can I help you get what you want and I get what I want in return? That is the fundamental bedrock of business. So if I want to do business with somebody, whether they're a producer or a director or an investor or anything, I'm just asking the question constantly, what do they want? And how do I get them that? And then be very clear about what I want so they can give me that. And so that ultimately is what spawned me doing my first full movie front to back, which just wrapped, as you know, I guess it was 2 weeks ago in Rome. Yeah. So I got flown out to Rome, business class flights, all expenses paid to be in this action movie. And I get to be with these other, they're not like A-list celebrity stars, but have you ever heard of Tom Welling? Does that name anything? No. Have you ever heard of the show Smallville? Yeah. So it's a superhero show about Superman's origins. Well, the lead of that show is Tom Welling. Ran for 10 seasons. And so, very well-known guy. He's the lead of the movie. And then another guy, Cam Gigandet, he was in the OC, which is a very famous show for many, many years. Been in a bunch of big-name movies. Anyway, those guys are the lead. So I get to hang out with them all day, like learn from them, because they're long-term pros. And I get to, for me, I played this character, the character's name was Jack, and he's this manic psychopath character. I was the second leading villain in the movie. My older brother was Cam's character, was the lead villain. It's kind of like we were drug dealers. He was the lead guy. He was the mastermind, got his shit together, a little bit crazy, but still could handle everything and was the main leader. I was basically the fuck up. I was the guy that every scene I'm in, I'm creating chaos. I'm kind of ruining sort of his plans. Well-meaning, but literally crazy. And but it's so fun to inhabit a character like that, because I think that character's experience, I have a lot of compassion for him. There's a lot of people that are in this world, although we don't meet them every day, that is their existence. That is their life, of just that constant inner battle of trying to feel significant and getting that significance through violence or dominance, which was kind of the super agenda of my character in the movie. But anyway, to wrap that piece up, I got that opportunity, and when I did, and I started sharing that I had that opportunity, I can't tell you, dude, how many people were like, I remember when you said you were going to be an actor, and I called bullshit in my head. I didn't think you could do it, or I thought maybe you could long term, because there's so many people that want to be actors. But when I shared this, it was like, as is the purpose for my life, a light bulb goes off, and they think, well, shit, like if he can do that, at 30 years old, he can just decide he's going to be an actor and then immediately do it and get paid for it. Then maybe I can have my dream. Maybe I can make films. Maybe I can have this business that I've always wanted. Maybe I can quit my W-2 and finally have a career that lights me up. And so that was, when I started my career as an actor, that was actually an intention. It wasn't just to be in movies, and I'm certainly nowhere near where I'm going to be in this moment. But I knew, just as I did when I did the coaching business, I forgot. I'll tell you this quick anecdote, that a couple months into running the training business, I was still living in my car at the time. And I remember I was driving to church. It was New Year's Eve, 2015. I was driving to church, and by this time I'd already left faith. I'd really left my belief structure, but yet I was still going to church. And the reason why is because that night I didn't have anywhere to sleep. And I knew that if I showed up to church for the New Year's Eve service, and I kind of like offhandedly explained, oh yeah, I don't have anywhere to sleep tonight, then someone there I hoped would have pity on me and invite me to stay at their house. And I remember driving, and I'm crying on the way there, because I feel so full of shame that this is what my life has come to. My parents loved me better than for me to end up in this position. And I feel like I'm more educated, like I've completed high school, completed college, and yet I'm still here. How is it that I'm in this bad a shape? And while I'm crying, it was like a lightning bolt hit me, and I made a commitment. I slammed my hands on the steering wheel and I said, one day I'm gonna get out of this, and I'm gonna do it so fast that I'm gonna inspire others to do the same. That really was the birth, the genesis of the mentoring. Even though I didn't mentor for quite a while after that, that was where it began, because I knew I wanted to grow the training business fast, because I wanted other trainers or other people struggling to be inspired to think that more is possible. And so with that same approach to making films or my investments or anything that I do, selling the coaching business, like I want it to be done in such a way that people say, well, can it really just be that easy? Can it really be that fast? Can it happen for him? Maybe it can happen for me.
I love this, dude. This is amazing. And so, if I was to blend you up, what do you think the essence is that would kind of like drip to the bottom, is that we could distill down and be like, oh, this is a part of the secret sauce? Like, what is it that then I could be like, I want some of that? Yeah.
Well, there's several things. The first and most important skill that I have and have developed is the skill of learning quickly. And learning is many things. It's not just like spending time putting in information. I think the specific way that I learn is, as soon as I input information, I try to either teach it or put it into action immediately. Because it's not until you do or teach something that it really starts to lock into your nervous system and become real. And so over the years, I've built this habit of, whether I'm learning a coaching business, I'm learning how to mentor, I'm learning ads, I'm learning Facebook, I'm learning sales, I'm learning how to act, whatever it is, I want to learn from the best. So get around people, whether I have to pay them or add value to them in some way, like whatever it takes, I want to get around people that have the skill or have the thing that I need. And then I'm gonna add value to them until they teach me. And then I'm gonna do whatever the fuck they say. And I'm gonna do it fast. Because really the essence of shortcuts, and I'm writing a book on this. So I'm gonna release a book on this. It'll probably come out, I'm gonna finish it this year, but I don't know if it'll come out till maybe end of next year or something like that. But this book, Shortcuts, is gonna be like the book that's most helped me in my life. Whenever someone's asked me like, what's one book recommendation? The most important, and this is by far the most important book I've ever read, is The Success Principles by Jack Canfield. I've probably read that book 10 different times. I read it every year since I discovered it in 2015. And that book is essentially, here's everything that you need to have whatever it is that you want. And this is like it's not my like version of that, but I hope to do with my book what that book did for me for somebody else by sharing my stories and by sharing the stories of other people who I will include in the book. But it's basically like, the book is called Shortcuts. It's how to ethically get whatever you want faster than you ever thought possible. So it's the idea of how do I get to my goal? And it could be a weight loss goal, it could be a business, it could be this thing that other people think is impossible or not realistic, but how do you get it and get it fast? Because I think that speed is really so accomplishing something inspires, but doing it fast inspires greatly. And the purpose of my life personally is inspiration. If in a word, it is just that. It's like I want other people to believe that more is possible for their lives through watching mine. So in writing this book, it's going to distill down like basically how do you learn and implement quickly? Who are the people? How do you connect with those people? How do you implement then what they've said? How do you focus on the right things and not the wrong things? Prioritizing effectively. How do you build good, long-lasting relationships? These are all just like small keys that lead up to the bigger whole. But I think that learning is really at the key. Learning well, learning and implementing well.
I think the implementation is something not a lot of people talk about. And it's amazing because I see that in you. Like, you are so amazing at the implementation and put the road onto rubber and let's go for this. So,
well, I want to say this also on this point, because I think this is important, that maybe someone watching this or listening to this is thinking, well, it just must be so easy for him. Like, he's so motivated. Of course, he's going to go after all these goals, after all these dreams. What you have to understand is that I was in such a dark place a few years ago that I literally thought my life would amount to nothing. I thought that I was going nowhere. I was no one, and it would always be that way. And I had a lot of evidence to back that up at that time. But confidence, which is super, super important to motivation, like for someone to feel motivated to even try to do something that feels big, they have to have confidence. It is a necessity. However, they don't need to have a lot of confidence. They just need to have growing confidence. And growing confidence comes from making and keeping commitments to yourself. And making and keeping commitments to yourself doesn't have to be big either. Let's say you want to lose weight and you're in the best shape ever. Like, looking at your physique, I'm like, oh my God, Chris is my idol when it comes to physical. Your hair is awesome too. Like, it's styled perfectly. I'm sitting here, I'm like, wow, I need this. This is great. But if someone wants to lose weight, I'm just using it because it's a simple example. A lot of times when people are overweight, they think, okay, I need to work out twice a day. I need to work out for 2 hours a day. I need to eat only fruits and vegetables and like meat and like no desserts and none of. They go so extreme. And then that works for a week. Maybe it works for a month. And they get some progress, but eventually it becomes unsustainable. They fall off, and then they start beating themselves up because they didn't stay on the track of doing the thing they originally committed to, which was unrealistic for fucking anyone, including Dwayne Johnson, like, or whoever your fit celebrity is. If instead they took a small approach, they just said, you know what, I'm gonna start with not changing anything in my diet, but walk for 5 minutes a day. But I'm gonna do it every day. And they just build that habit and they say, I'm going to walk for 5 minutes a day. They walk out of their house. Even if it's 9 o'clock at night, they know they can still walk for 5 minutes to meet their goal. And they do that for a week. And all of a sudden they're like, wow, I kept my commitments. And it wasn't that hard. Suddenly now it's 10 minutes a day of walking. Then it's 15 minutes. And before the end of that year, now they're working out for 30 to 45 minutes a day. They're eating more vegetables. They're eating fewer processed foods, more desserts. It's happened very gradually, but it happens in a way that sticks. And it sticks not just because it's implementable, but now it's going to stick because they have a year's worth of following through on their commitments that locks into their subconscious. I'm someone that can be trusted. I'm someone that can and will follow through when I say I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do. And so if somebody's like, well, I'm just lacking confidence right now, or I don't think that dream is possible, I'm not the kind of person who XYZ, then start small. Start with something small. It could be a weight loss. It could be a business thing. It could be making connections. I don't know what that is. It depends on what your goal is. But really, really, really obsess over making it smaller, the action, than you think it needs to be. Because the most important thing is that you get yourself into a state of belief, of personal belief. and personal belief, meaning I can achieve the thing that I want. That is my literal superpower. Is I just have insane, like I say insane. I have unrealistic belief in myself, like unreasonable. But then those unreasonable beliefs turn into reality. I think that if you ever watch Genius, the Kanye West documentary, so that was his superpower. Is like he just had this irrational belief in himself that he would make it.
Yeah.
And it came true. He had belief when no one had belief in him. And that's what I have. And that is what I was not born with. But it can be developed.
I think this is profound because what I'm really picking up, and because a personal crisis starts when the story you tell yourself about yourself is no longer true. And what I love that you're putting down here, Sterling, is that we need to be able to, because I really believe in this, we need to be able to trust ourselves. And if we're constantly breaking our commitments to ourselves, that is never going to happen, because only ourselves will know what we did at the end of the day. And I think that's where someone can actually truly have fulfillment and happiness. And what I see just pouring out of your pores is you have built a person that you love and that you respect and that you admire, and then you're able to have this outcome, this intention that you want to be able to have, and you follow through with it.
Right.
That is a superpower.
Mm-hmm.
It's fucking amazing. I think that's really cool.
Yeah. And yet, not taking away at all, it is my superpower, and it is a superpower that is acquirable.
Yes.
So that's what I really want to focus on. Is like I'm no hero in some sort of like genetic sense,
you
but
are a hero, but you're Batman. You're not an X-Men or something like that.
well, hopefully not even Batman, because he inherited a lot of wealth.
Okay.
Like,
No, true. Even that. But like you created yourself. I think of that amazing statue of like the self-made man. I think there's obviously. I definitely don't want to take away from the goddess of fortune. Do you know what I mean? Like.
Of course, and the mentors that guided me, of which I have 1,000.
Absolutely.
Like,
but you put yourself in front of them. And I think this is where the listener, you still need to do the work, go through the steps to be able to make that happen. And I think that's something that's really, really cool. I'm going to take a head-snapping turn with this right now. Passive income. So we've had the story from creating the first business, the training business, business mentoring, selling it, now going on to these other ventures as well. Creating passive income, because I think this is I think you have an extreme amount of great practical knowledge when it comes to this as well. What was your initial thoughts on why you wanted the passive income, how you would get it?
Yeah, well, I wanted passive income because I wanted to be able to pursue my career of acting without basically having responsibility for income. I mean, passive income is the only way to like real time freedom, ultimately. Like long-term permanent time freedom, it has to come through passive income. So when I sold my business, I realized that up to that point, all of my income had been active. I had not bought a single real estate property, hadn't invested in another business. I mean, I had some money in the stock market, some crypto, but that's not income. That's just like an asset that appreciates. This ownership interest that appreciates. But when I sold the business, I'm like, okay, I need to put this capital into something that can earn for me. And I had 3 goals. The first goal actually was not passive income, but it was tax savings. Because I was making all this money at one time, I was like, I don't want to pay 35% or 37% to the federal government. I live in Texas, a tax-free state within the U.S., so I've got that checked off. But the federal government's going to want a big cut. Is there a way around this? And so what I did immediately was I joined, as I learned from every other thing, if I have a problem, I need a mentor. So I joined a real estate mastermind. It's called Go Abundance, amazing group. And I started learning, you buy property, you do this structure for it, you can write off all of your income. You can write off all this money that you're making. And so that was how the year after I sold. Now, one thing I did that was useful to me was I sold in 2020, but I delayed most of my income from the sale to come in 2021 because it was at the end of 2020. I didn't have a place to put the money to save on the taxes. So I had most of it come in 2021. And then, so that gave me time to like figure out how I'm going to save on it. So I'm proud to say that in 2021, I paid 0 income tax as a result of the investments I made. all from real estate. Real estate really saved me, particularly big commercial buildings. So I don't do any residential. I don't do any single family. Not saying I won't ever, but I just found that my particular version of investing was better served avoiding that. And there's a couple of reasons why. So the first thing was tax savings. Second was I wanted passive income. And there's so many forms of real estate that are actually not passive. So let's say that you want to buy a bunch of single family homes. Well, a lot of investors that are new to investing, they get into it, they buy some homes, and they realize that there's all this maintenance they got to do on the property. There's all this like unhappy tenants that are calling them at whatever time to fix some broken thing. There's insurance that has to be kept up with. A lot of your income is cut from your property taxes on those. And so right out of the gate, I'm like, what's the most passive form of real estate that I can own? That was literally my first question after the tax savings. And I realized there's this form of investing called, there's this particular lease structure in commercial, which is called triple net. And triple net leases are where the tenant is responsible to pay for their own property taxes, they pay for their own insurance on the property, and they pay for all their own maintenance. And so when I discovered this was a thing, I'm like, that's all I want to buy. I just want to buy properties like that because that's where the income from the property is literally passive, like because they're self-managing. On top of that, with commercial triple net leases, you can get really long-term leases as well. So I found, I could get a 10-year lease, a 12-year lease. I mean, I have 3 properties closing right now where I'm a 50% owner in each, and then I have an investor on each of these properties. They're all urgent cares, and I mentioned urgent cares. I mentioned this off camera to you. Urgent cares are basically if a hospital and a McDonald's had a baby, that's what makes it urgent care. It's like fast food healthcare, and it's the #1 consumer trend.
Like an oxymoron.
I know it's strange, right? It is literally, or maybe not if you start eating the food at the hospitals. But yeah, they're the #1 consumer trend in all of healthcare, and that's because they're faster service and they're lower cost. So that combination, essentially the Amazon way. How do we make it faster? How do we make it cheaper? They've done very well, and also combined with that, in the U.S. particularly, we have a rapidly aging population. Right now, 8.5% of the population, this number's from 2020, is geriatric, so meaning that older segment of the population, and they are the people that spend the most as a percentage on healthcare for obvious reasons. By 2050, that number is going to be 16.7%. So in the next 30 years, as a percentage, roughly double, which means that the current supply, and the hospitals are already like backed up on demand. So by then, it's going to be an even bigger problem. And on top of this, there's no one big player in the urgent care or in the medical space that is kind of the 800-pound gorilla. You know, there's no Uber, there's no Amazon there. There's no player that has more than 5% of that space. So it's very wide open. To all that to say, I love urgent cares, I love emergency rooms, I love these multi-tenant doctor's office, a lot of medical and a lot of industrial. So industrial is like trucking, shipping, manufacturing, logistics. This is stuff that the supply chain depends on, e-commerce depends on, oil and gas depends on, utilities, et cetera, et cetera. So these are industries that, I mean, I'm sure you already intuited this, these are industries that are going to do well.
Yes, they're safe. In
the recession that is coming. You know, depending on when you're watching, it may already be there. It's coming soon. And so I wanted to be in industries that were going to be safe. Oh, by the way, on those urgent cares, they all come with 20-year leases. So I've got a locked-in lease for 20 years. So, and there's a corporate guarantee on it. There's a personal guarantee from the owner of the tenant company. So I could go on and on, but it's basically like super safe, super passive, big tax advantages, and then big upside because I could just basically forget about it. 5 years, I wake up and there's $1 million sitting there. And so if I can place my capital intelligently, and I can do it, and I can find undervalued deals that enable me to do that, which is what I have a team to do. And because a deal is never good if you get in for too much. A deal is never good if you get in for too much, unless you're in Austin, in which case it doesn't matter. Like you just wake up in 10 years, doesn't it? You buy the worst deal, you're still going to make a lot of money. Which is why location, of course, matters so much. But if you get in for less than it's worth, and you're in an area that's solid and is going to appreciate, it's hard to lose. It's really hard to lose. So that's why I focus on acquiring, and that's my, I call it my side hustle, this capital raising company. It's not capital raising. I buy, each of the urgent cares is between 3.5 and 5.88 million that we're all acquiring in June. So it's going to be a fun month. It's going to be a lot of fun. So that's my side hustle while acting is the main squeeze.
I absolutely love it. What's most fascinating or energizing for you now?
I just left. There's so many things that light me up. I just left this weekend, though. I'm talking about right now. Is I left staffing that personal development workshop that I went to all those years ago. I was volunteer. So I went back because I wanted to help other people go through the same processes, support them through their process because of how life-changing that was for me. And I had the guy who ran the workshop, his name is Chris Lee. And Chris Lee has been, Lewis Houses, right? Yeah, so Lewis, his personal mentor for the last decade is Chris Lee. And Lewis actually originally was the one that invited me to this workshop. Wow. He's the one that enrolled me, got me to go. And I'm so grateful to Lewis for that because it changed my life in a big way. So over the last, I guess it's been 8 months or so, I've been working with Chris privately as well. And he's like, I think that you should go into this because such a big part of who you are. And again, we need to be reminded more than we need to be taught. I need to be reminded of what's most important to me from other people too, not just from me. And so it's I really feel that so much of what you're about is not just achievement, but is contribution, is giving back, is supporting other people, lifting others. And so you need to just volunteer, just give back, support, and see what happens. So I did it, and throughout the weekend, Chris was there. It's here in Austin. And I go to him, and I'm like, we're going to start one of these in Miami. Because he lives in Miami. I just got a second place in Miami Beach. He lives in Miami Beach. And he's like, or no, literally what I said is Miami needs one of these centers. And he looks at me and he says, and we're going to do one together. We're going to do it together. And I'm like, it's like I didn't even hear him. I'm like, yeah, and I think we should do it together. He's like, did you even hear what I said? I just said that. I'm like, oh yeah, sorry. So I think that is also really, really important to me long term. That's why I'm writing this Shortcuts book. I mean, I'm writing it because I literally just want these lessons in people's hands. I feel like if it just helps one person, it's worth it. And then having this center, this personal development work that we can continue to grow and expand in new markets, both in Miami and then also virtually online and metaverse as that starts to become a viable option for people to attend seminars and go to workshops and have experiences. That's something that's really core to me. But I mean, on top of that, the movies, man. Movies are fun. Movies are cool. Who doesn't love movies? Yeah. Literally, show me a person that doesn't love movies and I'll show you an idiot. I mean, I don't know anyone. So, yeah, I want to be a part. Oh, and you'd asked me earlier off camera, you said, is there someone or is there a model for the kinds of roles that you want to do? The best person for this is Leonardo DiCaprio. Because if you go back through his career, and I'm talking from about 2002 on, so he's most well known for Titanic because that was one of the biggest movies of all time. It's like top 5 or something. But since then, all of his most interesting roles have come following that. So from 2002 up to today. And what I love about Leo, and I love specifically about the kinds of roles he chooses, first of all, very hard acting roles. So they're roles where a lot of times he's playing a real person. So he's playing a historical figure. So there's some truth or there's some background and this is a person that actually lived. So sometimes truth is more interesting than fiction. And so he plays these really interesting characters that many times are not purely good and not purely evil. So the kinds of roles which I find most interesting are actually where the person is both. They're both the hero and the villain, the anti-hero or the anti-villain. I think it's a better representation of who we all are. Because, yeah, it's like if you watch, contrast to that is Dwayne Johnson where he's like the all-good hero or whatever. He's the ultimate human being. That's how he's positioned in all of his films. It's I just think it's so boring. Personally. Of course, credit to Dwayne, he's a very inspiring guy, but the kinds of roles that I want to do are ones where it can give people a deeper sense of humanity. For someone to see a villain and to say, well, actually, that's in me too. And I'm glad by seeing it, I can give permission to that part of myself and maybe not encourage it, but I can at least validate that being there so that I have awareness of it and it doesn't own me. Because it's what exists within us that we are not aware of that owns us. That's one of the most important things I ever learned in personal growth is that it is what exists within us that we are not aware of that owns us. And so by telling these stories many times of real people, I think that raises consciousness and supports the world in an interesting way.
I love watching you talk about this. If the listeners listening to this through the podcast, please watch the video of this. I'm in awe of watching it come out of you. It's really, really cool. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate you. You are living a life of inspiration. You at least have helped one person, that has been me, for sure. And I know there's been many, many others. I had a call with AJ after he sold.
Oh, cool. Yes, he just sold a couple months ago.
Yeah, and I remember he called me. He was walking around the streets of New York. And
that's what he does.
I thought he was just floating.
Yeah.
Like, he was so happy. And it made me so happy. Like, I use the Pali word buddhita, which is sympathetic joy. The joy you feel when you see someone else enjoy. And I was just like, I remember getting off that call with AJ and just being so happy for him. Like, and I know you had a part to play with that. So I was just like, that's incredible. I think that's really cool. You definitely lead a life where it's not breadcrumbs you leave behind because you're consciously putting it behind. Like, you've kind of like put the screwdriver through the bucket of paint and you're leaving the paint behind as you go through. And I think that's really cool and I really appreciate that. This has been great, Sterling.
Thank you, man.
I really am thankful you've taken the time to sit down and have this conversation. It's been really cool to finally sit down with you after so many years as well.
For real.
And I am looking forward to everything that unfolds before you do.
Thank you, man.
Congratulations.
Well, dude, I just appreciate how encouraging you are. Like, I feel so lifted in your presence. I felt it even digitally. You've sent so many just super loving, kind, uplifting messages. I can tell this is who you are at your core, and there's no small difference in the world that you're making too. Like, because of your heart, because of your energy, your passion, you have a desire to serve people with your life, with your mission, whether that's in the coaching business, the future ventures I'm sure you're stepping into piece by piece. I just want you to know that you've really supported me in a big way through what you've said.
Brother. You're amazing. I appreciate it so much, but I'm going to give you a hug.
All right, let's do it. Let's do it, man. Great job, dude. Really great job. Thank you, brother.